Stephen, can you hear me all right? Okay, thank you. All right, good morning, everyone. We'll call this meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee order for April 7th. Welcome, everyone. We will start the meeting by doing our introductions and a roll call. Um, do we have someone to actually call the roll? Cheryl, are you available?
Yes, I'm available.
Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Bill Roberts,
Present?
Barbara Kennedy Gibson, Terrence Trott, he's running late, Carolyn Brown, Amy Espinosa,
Here.
Ed Majewski,
Here.
Beatrice Zafra, Stephen Hollenkamp,
Here.
Rick Fernandez,
Here.
Christina Costa,
Here.
Artie Fryer,
Here.
Hoyt Prindle, Rick Richmond,
Here.
Don Skelton Jr.,
Here.
Jeff Lucas, Alexis Bobak, Cliff Reese, Vivian Handy, Nicole Rice,
Here.
David Bailey. All right, we are one short for our in-person quorum.
All right, thank you very much, Cheryl. Given that we are short for a quorum, we will start moving through the agenda anyway. Let's start moving through the agenda anyway. And the next section on our agenda is the public comment. Is anyone signed up for public comment? There's no one here in the room.
I don't see any hands raised.
No hands raised. Give it a moment in case someone's on the phone. Oh, okay. Seeing none, we'll close the portion of the meeting for the public comment. The next item on our agenda is members' interests. Do any of the members have any items for future committee meetings that they would like to bring up for discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Christina Costa is recognized.
Thank you. I just wanted to give our the committee a quick list of the high points that I derived from last month. I was not able to attend our conference or our meeting because I was attending a national bicycle summit that happens once a year. And so I have just some couple bullets I'll share with the group, and perhaps we'll determine that something should be on our agenda for future additional discussion. What I learned that globally 50% of the food deliveries, which are way up because of the pandemic, are made on two wheels. So that means bicycles, e-bikes, and scooters, globally 50%. The League of American Bicyclists is the organization that hosted the conference, and they are also the assessment organization for communities and businesses and universities that apply for a bicycle-friendly status. And they are in the process of reworking and removing a lot of their enforcement metrics that have been part of their process for a long time, reworking those things to mitigate or in recognition of the racial disparities that happens in the enforcement of various traffic and bicycle laws. A really big emphasis is being made right now on the notion that good design results in self-enforcement. So I think that might be something this group is interested in learning more about when we design our roads for low speed, and we use design instead of the other education or enforcement methods, we just don't need a lot of education and nearly any enforcement when we have good design. Another term that is emerging, and many people may have heard this, but I want to put it out there for you all, is something called mobility as a service, or MOS. So that's something that is beginning to get a lot of traction in this realm. And then, of course, there was a tremendous amount of attention paid on the worsening crash and fatality rates. I'm very pleased to see that we have, as an attachment to today's agenda, the Dangerous by Design report. And so those are, that's something I hope we can dig into in great detail at a future meeting to understand that report, but also understand the solutions that so far are not being utilized sufficiently. I'm happy to answer any questions or give more detail offline to anyone who's interested in a deeper dive on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine, for that excellent report. Are there questions from the committee members of Christine? Yes, Amy?
Christine, no. Sorry, not for Christine, but I have another.
Oh, okay. Let me just make a comment for Christine. You mentioned design encouraged self-enforcement. Were you able to get any information about what best practices are in design that you might bring to the committee to make us aware of?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the self-enforcement that happens through good design is made up of a couple of different components. There are some automated enforcement opportunities. Some communities have, excuse me, advanced speed cameras or messaging to roadway users that if you're going a certain speed, you're just going to hit a next. Lights are triggered so that motorists are determined to be speeding, and the next light in their roadway will turn red because to force a stop. But in large part, the design includes narrower roadways. Of course, I'm not talking about highways at all, but narrower roadways, things like bulb outs, roundabouts are a great asset for roadway design that is self-enforcing. So everywhere, you know, the mindset that the aha moment that everybody is having right now is that we don't need to beg for enforcement to reduce speeding. What we need is design that makes it very, very unnatural or impossible for people to exceed the desired speed limit. I hope that answers your question just enough, but we can certainly do a deep dive on self-enforcement design at a later meeting.
Good, good. Well, thanks for that additional information. Are there any other questions of Christine? Okay, seeing none, Amy, you have a member's interest item you wanted to bring up?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I do, and I might be jumping the gun here a little bit, so I'm hoping to get an answer on that. I recently saw a video done by Luna Lazarus on some work that they were doing with the non-discrimination plan. So I don't know if that'll be talked about later with Joshua Barber's presentation, but if not, I would be very interested in the results of that work.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Any other items from the committee under members' interests? I'm not seeing any hands. I'd like to raise one item that I've mentioned before in previous meetings, and that is the heart study of the CSX railway project. And I know Ed is here today, but I'd like to ask if the committee would like to hear an occasional progress report on how that study is going and what reports are being given to Hart. Ed, is that something that you could pass along to the Hart representatives?
Sure.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. Any other members' interest items? I don't see the hands on the screen and none here in person. So given the lack of a quorum here in the room for a few more minutes probably, we will skip over the approval of the minutes and the action items and move to the status reports. The status report on our agenda is the non-discrimination plan update. Mr. Barber, are you going to give that report as scheduled?
Yes, yes, sir, Chair. Me and Dana Lazarus as well, just to address
Right.
Amy's interest.
Great. Well, welcome both. You can proceed with the report.
Wonderful. Rich, will you be sharing the presentation?
Either way you'd like.
I'm happy for you to share it, and I'll just tell you when to go.
All right, hang on a minute.
Yes, sir.
Can you see that?
Yes, sir. All right, y'all. Well, I will get started. Thank you so much. Oh, Rich, yeah.
Hang on, I'm still struggling here.
Okay.
I think I got the wrong presentation up.
You do. You have the tip one up.
Okay.
Still the tip.
Okay. I think I'm probably going to have to go through in this mode if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine as is. All right, y'all. Let's get started. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Josh Barber, MPO staff, here to provide an update on our 2021 non-discrimination plan. And I also have Dana Lazarus with me as well, who will be talking about the plan update as well. Just a little bit of a project background. The MPO is required to adopt a non-discrimination plan every 3 years. And really, the plan demonstrates our compliance with federal civil rights legislation, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the ADA, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and others. Our last one was adopted in March of 2018, and so we're looking at an update this year, which has been ongoing. In addition to demonstrating our compliance with federal civil rights legislation, it's also a medium for us to advance equitable processes and programs and policies for our agency. The big thing this year, given discussions on racial justice and other equity issues, we will be expanding the plan to include the Hillsborough City County Planning Commission, which has been a big endeavor. And the plan really covers the areas identified here. We identify our underserved communities and where they're located spatially. We look at how we engage those communities in our work, how we evaluate the equity outcomes of our plans, whether that's through GIS or the regional planning model or other performance measures. We look at how we've integrated Title VI principles and equity into our primary program areas. So the LRTP, the Transportation Improvement Program, the comprehensive planning process, etc. A major component of our Title VI requirements is having a Title VI complaint process, a procedure, and a staff liaison. So in the event that a member of the public feels they've been discriminated against, they have recourse through us. And then also our plan will have a series of recommendations, both for the agency as a whole, Plan Hillsborough, but also the MPO and the Planning Commission individually. Next slide, please. And so under federal law, starting with Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, we have to ensure non-discrimination in the provision of all of our activities. And this is a requirement for any agency that receives federal funds. So the initial language from the 64 Civil Rights Act focused on race, color, and national origin, but subsequent acts such as the Rehabilitation Act, the ADA, the Highway Act have added protected classes for income, ability, sex, gender, sexual orientation, age, English proficiency, family status, and religion. So these are the areas where we have to ensure non-discrimination. Next slide, please. And just a bit of overview of what you'll see in the plan. Our first major task was defining equity or identifying a framework for equity to help build the plan around. We've taken a deep dive into the history of discrimination and planning policy in our community locally. As I've said, we identify our communities of concern, that's or our underserved communities. That's a federal requirement where we must identify racialized communities, ethnic communities, etc., spatially. We do a self-evaluation of the work we've done in the past 3 years to see how we've incorporated Title VI into that. This year, a major component is a community engagement process to update and inform the plan and the recommendations, which Dana will be speaking of soon. And then finally, our recommendations. Next slide, please. And so a major component of our equity planning work this year is examining and documenting the history of racism and planning in Hillsborough County. This is something that our governments from the federal to the local level have failed to address. And so while a lot of us know the general history of urban renewal, of highway construction, of exclusionary zoning, and we may know generally how these policies manifested themselves in Hillsborough County. You know, it's important for us as an agency. We have a responsibility and an obligation to document and acknowledge the specific and intentional ways that these policies shaped our communities. There really cannot be justice without public acknowledgement of the specific ways planning has harmed Black people and other people of color, and a public process to discuss these policies, relate them to how what current challenges we have in our community, and come up with a community-centered vision to how to overcome those challenges. So to that end, we've looked at local, state, national law, and politics to help kind of frame the years from 1900 to the 1970s, pretty much the rise of the planning profession. We've looked at public and private housing, comprehensive planning, urban renewal, and highway construction. Next slide, please. And so I'll go a little bit over some of the history that we found for you all today. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but if you had an opportunity to attend the policy committee meeting for the MPO back in March, you'll have seen an extended version of this. But I do have to provide a disclaimer that there are quotes and images from historical documents in the following slides, which are insensitive or inappropriate by today's standards. They're being provided so that there's no mincing of words or lack of clarity about what the specific policies in these plans were. Next slide, please. So to start with public and private housing, I'll provide a brief overview of some of the items listed here. Deed restrictions. In the early 1900s, racially restrictive covenants became an important instrument in enforcing racial segregation throughout the country. These are clauses in the deed of a property that lists obligations that purchasers of a property must assume. And for over half of the 20th century, a commonplace clause in many of these property deeds stated that They shall never be sold or rented to African Americans or other racial and ethnic minorities. In Hillsborough County, I took the time to go down to the Hillsborough County Clerk of the Court to review property deeds prior to 1964 on those old 35mm rolls, if you've ever been down there. And we have documented racially restrictive covenants in areas such as Ruskin, Seminole Heights, Davis Islands, and North Hyde Park. Not an extensive review, a sampling. There's no doubt more out there, but you know, we provided the clauses in our document, which will be forthcoming. In the area of public housing, it's important to understand that the first major involvement in public housing came with the 1937 Housing Act, where the federal government provided funds to build public housing to local housing authorities, which led to the creation of the Tampa Housing Authority in 1937. Their first project was North Boulevard Homes, which was first occupied in 1940. And it's important to note that all public housing built by local, state, federal funds was segregated by race through at least likely the 1968 Fair Housing Act. North Boulevard Homes was a Black-only public housing complex. Others in the area in Tampa include Robles Park Village and Lake Avenue Homes, which was white only. Riverview Terrace on Broad Street in North Seminole Heights was white only. And it's important to know that public housing in the county and nationwide was used to create and reinforce racial and ethnic segregation, whether that was through displacing Black residents in certain areas, such as the case with Robles Park Village, which was a predominantly Black neighborhood and a white public housing complex was built upon it, or concentrating Black residents in other areas, which you see with North Boulevard Homes in the West Tampa area. Mortgage, the Homeowners Loan Corporation is the next big thing. This was a program started under the Roosevelt administration's New Deal in 1933, and really created a uniform appraisal system for mortgage lending nationwide. The map is shown on the right, the infamous redlining map, where areas in green were deemed the most desirable and often had community characteristics identified that were, you know, the best grade American, middle, upper class, white, and then that was in contrast to the yellow and redlined areas where the housing was described as blighted or subpar, and where the citizens were primarily Black, Jewish, Spanish, and other non-Americans. And it's definitely worth a review of some of the language that was used in these maps. Next slide, please. The next area I want to go over is comprehensive planning and zoning. The first comprehensive, the earliest zoning law in the US was Los Angeles in 1908. But from 1910 to 1917, several major cities enacted zoning laws which restricted neighborhoods on the basis of race. This was ultimately struck down in 1917 it was a Louisville ordinance that was struck down. But while racial zoning was outlawed, many jurisdictions adopted policies and mechanisms that were not explicitly race-based because it was illegal, but were nonetheless used to enforce racial and economic segregation and disproportionately harm racialized and ethnic communities. Some examples of this are minimum lot sizes, bans or restrictions on multifamily development in white and upper middle class neighborhoods, disparate enforcement of new building codes and standards, and the siting of industrial land uses and other undesirable uses near racialized and ethnic neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So I'll go over a few of the comprehensive plans and zoning plans that were adopted in Hillsborough County. This was the first one, Tampa's 1941 Major Street Plan. And there are some quotes provided here on the language used in the plan, including the first proposed routing of Interstate 275, what would become Interstate 275 besides Central Avenue. And they stated that such a project would do much towards clearing up a blighted slum north of Cass Street on both sides of Central Avenue. which was the scrub. The map on the right shows predominantly Black or African American neighborhoods in the city. And as I mentioned, you can see Robles Park up there, which was identified as a predominantly Black neighborhood, as well as Dobyville. Next slide, please. In 1942, Tampa adopted their first zoning plan. It's a pretty extensive document. And while there were no explicit racial intent behind the zoning decisions that are cited within the plan, you can clearly see that the majority of the multifamily zoning categories relate to the previous map that was shown. In addition, you can see some very clear policy directives regarding removing Black people from certain areas of the city, including Dobyville, as well as the scrub. Especially the last sentence of the second quote is very telling. And so you can see a very intentional racial intent behind these policies. Next slide, please. And then the 1945 Tampa Comp Plan. This was, this plan detailed recommendations for parks and rec, civic art, civic centers. It reflected segregation at the time. There were recommendations for segregated public facilities in West Tampa and the area around 22nd Street and MLK. And the plan also used some very strong language regarding the scrub, which I provided here. Next slide, please. And this wasn't restricted, of course, to only Tampa. Of course, Hillsborough County's growth throughout the early 20th century was mostly focused on the city, but you see even in Plant City's comprehensive plan from 1956, a very similar map to the 1941 Tampa plan that shows predominantly non-white areas on the south side of the tracks in Plant City. And you also see explicitly racially segregated school siting, parks and rec, and other disinvestment in the Black community there at the time. Next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit about urban renewal now. Urban renewal projects were funded under the 1949 Federal Housing Act, which intended the funds to be used for slum clearance throughout the county. Federal loans were provided to local jurisdictions to purchase, condemn, and clear blighted areas. Land was sold to developers to pay off the loan with the expectation of publicly subsidized housing. And the 4 urban renewal projects in Hillsborough County are shown here. Next slide, please. The first one we'll go over was started in 1962. It was the scrub area, or in the federal documents, it was called Maryland Avenue. I provided some quotes prior that described the scrub as the principal slum area of Tampa and some other strong language. This project was 60 acres with 376 families. By the time demolition started in the area, there was no housing developer selected to replace the demolished units. By 1963, only 21 of the 106 families that were looking for relocation had been housed, and 8 of them were relocated to substandard housing. It wasn't until 1966 that a builder was designated to construct low-income housing at the site, and these would become Tampa Park Apartments. The land was donated by the city to a private developer. At the time, the Tampa branch of the NAACP raised significant concerns about the project, mostly criticizing the Urban Renewal Agency of Tampa and their lack of minority representation on the committees. And they also desired to reestablish the scrub area as Black only, segregated, which was after the 1954 Brown v. Board of Education decision, which outlawed racial segregation in public facilities. There's a quote provided here by Robert Saunders stating that if this project continues, that Black people in Tampa will be relegated to a continuous pattern of racially segregated housing for the next 50 to 100 years. These complaints were eventually raised to the federal government as well. Next slide, please. The next project in Hillsborough County funded under urban renewal was in 1963. It was the Riverfront Project. A 1961 survey showed that the study area identified in the maps to the right, the top one is before, the bottom one is after, had 10 white families, 670 black families, 176 businesses, and 6 institutions. As part of the redevelopment, land was sold to the University of Tampa, City of Tampa. The land sold to the city would become John F. Germany Library and the Curtis H. Convention Center. The University of Tampa land would eventually be resold and became Julian B. Lane Park. And other land was sold off to private entities for the construction of housing, offices, and hotels. And more land was used for the construction of the interstate highway system. And while the city made assurances to the federal government that subsidized public housing would be built to accommodate those displaced by the project, it took a long time for that to be constructed. The first one was Presbyterian Village in the early 1970s, and then of course, Oakhurst Square apartments were built during the same period. Next slide, please. And then, oh yeah, my Ybor City. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about highway construction. The 1956 Federal Aid Highway Act provided funding for the construction of the interstate highway system across the US. And Tampa was situated at the intersection of 2 of the designated highways. In addition to the construction of I-75, or what would become I-275 and I-4, this crosstown expressway was built in the 1970s, which was a legacy project that was originally identified in the 1941 Tampa Street Plan. So a very early project, and you can also relate that back to the explicit intent of destroying the neighborhood of Dobyville. Next slide, please. And so most significantly, the construction of these interstates would result in significant displacement of largely Black and Hispanic residents in the areas of West Tampa, the Scrub, downtown, and Ybor City. This is from the Master Highway Transportation Plan in 1957. The next 3 slides are that. This is from Armenia Avenue to North Boulevard. Next slide, please. This is the downtown interchange from the river, and you can see the intersection of I-4 and I-275, or what would become that, in the top right corner. Next slide, please. And this is the segment from Nebraska Avenue to approximately 22nd Street in Ybor City. Next slide, please. So by the late 1960s, trying to wrap up kind of our results of the history section, we see the destruction of major Black and Latin neighborhoods, Hispanic neighborhoods, Dobyville, largely gone, Roberts City, which was on the west bank of the Hillsborough River, or the Riverfront Project, was largely gone. The Scrub also, all the residents there displaced and the project was redeveloped. As well as Ybor City, there was a large urban renewal project there as well. And really, you see this displacement as stated in the comprehensive plans was primarily for economic development and highway construction. The city recognized that the area surrounding the central business district of downtown Tampa was very valuable, and so they had an incentive for removing primarily Black residents from the area of Roberts City and the Scrub for construction of new development, and they largely avoided building publicly subsidized housing in those areas as they believed it would be detrimental to the growth of the central business district. Then you also see further segregated neighborhoods, and neighborhoods that are segregated with an explicit intent. So you see that in East Tampa, in North Boulevard, and West Tampa. You see policies specifically directing Black residents to those areas, or forcing Black residents to those areas. And then you also see the construction of Progress Village in the 1960s. This was built primarily to accommodate displaced residents from urban renewal projects. And was also an explicitly segregated project which the NAACP of Tampa never supported because they never got an assurance that it would be an integrated community. You see the explicit exclusion of Black residents from the housing market in the form of racially restrictive covenants and other policies, and therefore from the intergenerational wealth building that occurs as a result of that. And then you also see the explicit exclusion of these residents from political office and planning efforts. Next slide, please. And so I want to make a transition now. It's a bit of a hard transition, so I apologize. We're going to go a little bit into our mapping process for this plan update to help identify our most underserved communities and communities protected under Title VI and other civil rights legislation. We did two methodologies for this plan update. We did dot density and the threshold method. Next slide, please. This first map shows the threshold method. The best way to understand what is going on here is we took all the block groups in Hillsborough County and we ordered them from highest to lowest by the percentage of a given demographic. On the left is racial minorities, on the right is low-income households, and then we cut those into fifths. So the darkest areas are the top fifth, and then the less dark areas are the next fifth. Next slide, please. And then to help further help us understand our community characteristics, we overlaid those maps, or at least certain portions of those maps. So the one on the left shows the intersection of our minority population that includes race and ethnicity, as well as our low-income population. And you can see the darkest areas represent the intersection of that. On the right is people with disability and low-income households. Next slide, please. And then our final mapping methodology is dot density. So where the threshold method is sensitive to concentrations of these particular groups in rural areas of the county by absolute percentage, these reflect the actual distribution of people across the county. So you can get an idea of density. On the map is race and ethnicity, where green is Black folks, white, or blue is white folks, red is Asian, and orange is Hispanic. And then on the right, you see our low-income households. And we did significantly more maps than this. We mapped zero vehicle households, female head of households, limited English proficient households, among others. And so with that, I'd like to hand it off to Dana to talk about our community engagement process and kind of wrap it up. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Josh. Hey, everybody. So nice to see a lot of you again and nice to see some new faces. Hi. This is so exciting. So yeah, bringing it from the past and the history of discriminatory planning to the present and what we are now doing to acknowledge that history and our part in it and what we can do moving forward. So community engagement is a huge piece of our operational definition of equity. Next slide, please, because I want to show that, you know, community leadership is a key component of equity, democratic participation, hearing from those voices that were historically left out of the conversation and even purposely left out of the conversation. And so I'm going to go into, we designed a community outreach program for this non-discrimination plan, which was new for our non-discrimination plan. So this was an improvement. And we did this for two reasons. One, to kind of guide the recommendations that will ultimately be in the non-discrimination plan, and two, to build new relationships in underserved communities and with people who, again, have been historically left out, so that we can continue this work into the future, again, have those like long-term sustainable relationships to build trust and with the agency and the community and work together for a more equitable future. So yeah, we focused on those underserved and communities that are protected by a variety of state, federal, and local legislation that Josh pointed out in the beginning of this presentation. Next slide, please. We designed a 3-phase engagement process to really carry through, to really think of everything and really value that community engagement that we're trying to get. And so we had an early engagement phase where we were building a brand. We have this logo that you can see, the Planning for Equity logo. We built up our webpage, which is on the planhillsborough.org site. Title VI and non-discrimination plan, it's under the plans tab. Then we designed an active engagement phase, which is when we're actually actively going out and talking to people and building those relationships. And that's what I'm going to focus on in the rest of this presentation. And which involved 4 strategies: a survey, field outreach, a storytelling forum event, which Amy mentioned she saw our commercial for, and focus groups. And then we also did an ongoing engagement phase. We also designed an ongoing engagement phase because we want to make sure that we don't just go in, learn from people, and then leave and never give people updates on how their feedback was used. We want this to, again, build relationships, build trust, and continue into the future to, make sure that we carry out the recommendations. So next slide, please. So the first strategy I'm going to talk about was our survey. And each strategy is designed to do something different. We wanted to hit different parts of the county, different segments of the population, so to hit different audiences. So the survey is kind of like a saturation pushed out to the whole county, and it was designed to collect quantitative data, so that we can do some data analysis on people's perceptions of things. We asked about access, and hopefully you all took it or saw it, but you may have seen me asked about access to different things in the community. So rate your access to transportation, affordable housing, healthcare, employment opportunities, all those important things. We asked about discrimination, both personal and systemic, if people felt like their access was affected by that. And then we asked for some ideas, pushed it out on social media, sent it out via email, had it printed on our flyers in Spanish and English, and we got over 500 responses. Next slide. We also used the survey, and we verbally administered the survey in the field. So the field outreach strategy is really key. It was very grassroots and important for us to be able to achieve our goal of understanding the needs of underserved communities. So we went out into using the intersection map that Josh mentioned earlier, to kind of identify priority locations around the country or the county. We went out, we had a team of 3. One member of our team spoke fluent Spanish. Another is a local of, it lives in Tampa, lives in one of the underserved communities. And we went out, we had a goal of collecting verbally 1 survey per person per day. We went out for 7 weeks, so we had a goal of about 50 surveys, but we blew that out of the water and we collected about 250 surveys in the field. So we went to key locations. We actually knocked doors, which was a very bold and new strategy for us to really meet people where they're at. We stood on the sidewalks and busy locations in front of bodegas and stuff like that. Next slide, please. Rich, next slide, please. And I really want to drive home why doing field outreach this way is so important. Because if we want to do outreach with underserved people who don't have time to come to our meetings, we have to meet them where they're at. We were able, you can see in the graphs there, to oversample people by race, by income, by ability, and also data. Grassroots organizing is a skill. There is data and strategy behind it. And it is shown that face-to-face is the best way to engage and form new relationships and to build trust. Also, like, interestingly, during COVID, this was also a good strategy because people aren't going to their regular civic meetings or church in person and things like that. So this, again, was really key to reach those really hard to reach people. Next slide, please. And I threw this slide in here because a lot of people have been asking about how did we do field outreach during the pandemic, because the timing is never within our control. And so we were doing this between December of last year and February of this year. And so we had a safety protocol. We stood 6 feet away from people. We were double masked. We actually gave out hand sanitizer to people, and we had a whole safety protocol. So it was pretty safe as we could be. Next slide, please. So that was our field outreach. So then we also, our third strategy was a storytelling forum. And this one was designed to be open, again, to everybody in the county. But with a storytelling forum, we wanted to hear people's stories. So this is kind of more the qualitative data to complement the quantitative data, to dig deeper into the patterns that were to be revealed by the survey. And so with the storytelling forum, it was virtual. It was on a Saturday afternoon. We had some fantastic community partners, the Corporation to Develop Communities of Tampa, Metro Inclusive Health, and the Waimama Community Development Corporation partnered with us and helped get different folks from these different communities to come. And we asked a series of questions, and we were into breakout groups so that people may feel more comfortable sharing their stories. And it was pretty well attended, and we learned some really interesting things. Next slide, please. And then finally, our focus groups. And all of these steps were kind of designed to kind of dig deeper and then dig deeper and then dig deeper. And so with the focus groups, we actually recruited people who we spoke to in the field, in these underserved communities. One of the questions at the end of the survey was, would you like to participate in a focus group and give us more information about how you answered the survey? And so we had 5 demographic-based focus groups to understand the specific needs and stories, the challenges faced by these protected demographic groups. So we had one for the Black African American community, one for the Latinx Hispanic community, people with disabilities, again, protected by the ADA, we had a low income group, and then an LGBTQ group as well. And each group had 5 to 9 people, was 90 minutes long, and we had, again, a set of questions that were designed to dig deeper and collect stories. Next slide, please. So that was our community outreach for strategy process, and that finished up earlier in March. And so now we're doing data analysis, and we are, from the outreach, the stories, the data that we collected, in addition to looking at other sources of data, our researching best practices for addressing equity in planning, some staff recommendations. We're putting this all together, and we're going to have some recommendations in the non-discrimination plan designed to move Hillsborough County closer to a more equitable county. So we have some agency-wide recommendations. We have recommendations specific to the MPO, and then recommendations for the Planning Commission. Agency-wide recommendations look at things like community engagement for the agency and how our staff does community engagement. It might look at like some HR stuff and diversity trainings and things like that, like across the agency. For the MPO, you know, we're looking at how can we use environmental justice areas to prioritize TIP projects, for example. Looking at maybe different advisory committee options, increasing representation on advisory committees, or even having an advisory committee that's dedicated to equity, or something. These are all things we're looking into. And then for the Planning Commission, looking at the comprehensive plans and really being very policy specific in those comprehensive plans, looking at ways to prevent displacement and gentrification and other like policies, and then also community engagement with them as well, and when they do their community plans. So those are just some examples of recommendations that we are actually currently right now putting onto paper and figuring out what they're going to be. And then we're going to have another non-discrimination plan update in 3 years, and we're going to check back in and see our progress. And that's where we're at. And that's it. Next slide. Thank you.
Great. I think you've gotten a lot of support. That was a great report, and you're to be commended on the outreach program. I think that's certainly one of the best I've ever seen. Are there questions of either Josh or Dana from the committee?
Yes.
Amy,
Uh,
Amy's recognized.
and I'm
Thank
already
you.
fired. I'd like to make a comment as well.
Okay. First and foremost, this is an excellent presentation, and I'm really excited to see that our county is being very progressive in this endeavor. So kudos for this research. I guess my biggest question is, where are these maps? Because, and this kind of goes into something in the agenda about a survey, like how to find things on the website. I can't find these maps. So are they public? And if so, where can I find them?
Hey, Amy, I'll answer that. They're not published yet. We're still working on finalizing them. Really, the only thing left is labeling the areas in the county that we would like to highlight. And then once that's done, I'm sure we'd be happy to share them. We're looking to completing the plan sometime this summer, so they'll definitely be there at the latest.
Awesome, thank you.
Questions? Yes.
Okay, this is Artie Fryer. Commendations on the plan and the work. Certainly, Joshua, as you mentioned, you would be straightforward with the information. I think history tells us quite a bit. And I think some of this information, although it's there, there's a broad swath of people who really didn't understand or didn't know about the depth of it. So I appreciate the way that you presented it and speaking about the facts that are there and the intent. And certainly, I'm sure some of the things that are written there are uncomfortable. And because of that, I see that you've done the community outreach, but there's one thing I'd like to kind of suggest. As someone who grew up here in Tampa, I don't know if many of you are aware of Middleton and Blake were high schools that were segregated high schools. And during the time that you mentioned, they were the high schools for Black people. I don't know if there was any effort to actually contact graduates or people who attended those high schools. So as you were going, and many of those areas or those circumstances that you talked about impacted those people. So as a specific group that was impacted by these results, I think the comments and perceptions or points of view that you get from them might give you a broader sense of how people react and respond to what happened because they actually lived through it. So my question is, would it make sense or is it practical to try and reach those persons and provide the survey to them? Because I don't know if they provided you a significant amount of feedback. And I think that's a particularly targeted group that this information could give you a perspective that might be a bit different from what you got.
Yeah, to answer your question, there wasn't a significant effort made to that end, but we definitely recognize that that is a major gap. And one of the portions of the history document is going to be areas for future research and updates. And so, just given time constraints and staff resources, we tried to focus on what's the documented planning documents are. But I think, as we look towards the next 3-year update, I'd really like to see the history work be kind of evolving and continuously updated as we learn more. And I think reaching out to those folks would be a good idea. I'd really like staff to look at the Hillsborough Remembers oral collection on the library website. There's so many resources out there, and we definitely recognize that we didn't unturn every stone. There's a lot, and I think having those perspectives from people who lived through this is essential in our understanding of these impacts, no doubt.
I would like to answer that as well. There was somewhat of an effort to reach out to people who did live through that history, at least with our storytelling. We've received hundreds of stories through the survey. There was like long answer segment on the survey about people's experiences. And in person, I attended like a history walk, and I've connected with people who were born in Tampa a long time ago, and tried to connect and build relationships with those folks. But like Josh said, any relationships that can lead to other relationships that can help us get more information moving forward would be really helpful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I do think that it would be worthwhile to make sure that you do a deeper dive in that particular area and aspect of this.
Good comment, Artie. Thanks. Ed, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. First, that the historical perspective was amazing, and I would suggest.
Are you muted, Ed?
No, he's fine.
Okay, sorry.
There was a in the 60s.
Now he's muted. I don't hear him now.
Ed, you're muted.
Okay, how about now?
Good.
Okay. First, I wanted to say that historical perspective was amazing and well done. I would also point you to, in the mid-60s, the American Association of Highway Officials, which was sort of like, you know, the governing body for all state DOTs or state highway departments had something called the Red Book. And it was a fairly, you know, a couple inch thick bound volume titled something like Guidelines for Design of Highways in Urban Areas. And it specifically cited opportunities for locating highways is in blighted areas to help remove blighted areas. And interestingly, also along riverfronts. And, you know, you may want to look that up. I think your presentation was great. That might be one other thing to look at, because it was really kind of like a national sort of guidance. So it was pretty horrendous.
Thanks, Ed. That's some great feedback.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Nicole, did you have a comment?
Yes. That was a great presentation, you guys. I wanted to make a comment, but then I also wanted to suggest 2 areas to possibly look at going forward with this. First and foremost, building on what Ed just said, this is why people have been super passionate about not expanding highways further and trying to reconnect neighborhoods, because the policies of why these initially occurred and the impact it has on having connected communities. But I think it's really a hard issue overall if you don't actually look at how we use our dollars in regards to CRAs and the role of CRAs. And I'm wondering if you guys have looked at how those are being utilized here for development dollars, and working with communities to make sure projects get to CRAs and making sure the lines and boundaries aren't just benefiting those for higher end development, and as well plat language. I recently last year we purchased a property in Forest Hills and changed the entire plat and refused to sign off on it because the language in my plat when I purchased that property stated that under no circumstance could any person of color or anybody who was LGBTQ, which is not the language used. It was really lovely language. My father and I refused to sign the plat and had it amended and removed from the property because it was illegal to rent, have anyone on my land who is a person of color, period, or under certain influences, in order to preserve the integrity of the neighborhood in Forest Hills. So I think a lot of people don't even realize that we still sign contracts for properties in this county and all over the country that entitles people to discriminate. So those are just a couple ideas or thoughts on that.
As far as the CRA dollars, that is not something we looked at. Not exactly the MPO or the Planning Commission's jurisdiction.
Well, I'm here, I represent the city of Tampa, and I understand that those are inside the city, but there's a lot of plans that are done within the Planning Commission that don't work in tandem with CRAs that are ready to roll, that are in major corridors of development. So I'm wondering if that's something that's even being thought about at all, working more in tandem with those groups that are overseeing development opportunities.
It has not been thought about, to answer your question. No, it's not something we've really considered in this planning process. I can definitely look into it though. Be happy to. And then as far as the plat language, you know, we've really just been trying our best to document where we found them. So one, I would love a copy of yours document. The language is not enforceable. There was a long history of Supreme Court cases establishing that. It was declared unenforceable in the 1970s. Basically, is kind of where it's at. So the language is still there. It's still being signed and agreed to. There's no way to bring it to court or anything like that. But there should definitely be a process in place to get them removed from contracts moving forward, I think.
I believe that it really is something that it's one thing to speak to long-term policies that are socially unjust, but it's another to be like, hey, to title companies, These plats should be removed. In our county, we're taking a stand, or in our city, we're taking a stand, and this plat language is no longer tolerable. These are handwritten plats. Almost anybody sitting here who's ever purchased a property has probably signed a contract stating that you agree with discriminatory policies in regard to your neighborhood. And I think that that's something that you can't move forward if you don't make amends for what's happening. So if we're still signing language and documents locally on property, there could come a day where there are people in power who want to utilize that language. And we're seeing that as a rise in our country with the rise of a lot of white supremacy. So I'd like to point that out.
Thank you, Nikki.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. Stephen Hollencamp, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for each of you. Dana, first, congratulations on landing what looks like your dream job. Looks like you're having a lot of fun, and this is just you're passionate about this, and so it makes sense that you're hitting out of the park the outreach. My question for you, Dana, is, 3 years from now we're going to get an update. I'm curious as to what success would look like. What we'd like to see 3 years from now. And Josh, super wonderful, very thorough research. I loved it. I'm texting now with the Improvement League, the president of the Improvement League in Plant City, and we'd love to have you come do this presentation and get a couple commissioners out, get a newspaper article written up. I'm curious if you'd be open to doing that. And if you have this presentation videotape, that would also be awesome.
I'd be happy to do that. There is a copy of the full presentation on YouTube for the March MPO Policy Committee.
The March MPO, what? Policy Committee?
Policy Committee.
Okay. And Dana, what's success look like?
Well, success won't happen in 3 years, but I think at kind of a minimum, more people need to know who Plan Hillsborough is. So more relationships, more just more people engaging with us. And there's one really cool recommendation that we've been hearing a lot about, having hubs in all of the communities where there's a planner or someone actually hired from the community that is the liaison between the community and the planning agency, that is constantly keeping everyone up to date on what's going on in the community, what's going on with planning in the area. So like tangible changes like that, hopefully we can get rolling in the next 3 years. There are some short-term things that we can do. We've already done, since I've been here last August, some deeper diversity and inclusion trainings and conversations with community groups. We're going to have we're working on having an Islam 101 basics training with staff. So there's some internal things. We're looking at language changing in our comp plans to be more inclusive and up to date. There's been changes on our website. There's now an equity tab on our website and a tab that sends you directly to information on accessibility in Title VI on our About tab on the website. So like things like that we're doing right away. But long term, I think what we'll see is what I'm hoping for is just more community-led planning. Plans and things in the community that it feels like everyone had a part in designing and is happy with. So I hope that gets
I'd
at
like
your question.
just demonstrable progress made in our recommendations as well on like short-term, medium-term, long-term basis, where we're, like documenting the implementation of our recommendations at the end of the day.
Good.
Thanks,
Good
guys.
question, Stephen. Christine, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dana and Josh, for excellent presentations. It's interesting to me. We can see that the history conveys, either stark and very blatant discrimination, but then the evolution of, workarounds so that the law may seem, our city areas may seem compliant to the laws, but in fact are not, through the variety of very subtle discriminatory and exclusionary land use policies. So my question to the entire group, but especially Dana and Josh, is I wonder if we're not seeing some of that advanced right now through the Tampa City Council consideration of exclusionary land use formulas being applied to some neighborhoods in South Tampa that are anti-density and anti-growth. So I wonder if that's something we could learn more about, or what your observations are. Are we seeing this reenacted today, real time?
The big one, Christine. I think we're definitely living within the historical and contemporary legacy of these planning policies. I think when you look at stuff like the Homeowners Loan Corporation maps, and then you look at neighborhood outcomes today, there's a demonstrable relationship between poor outcomes, whether that's in terms of public health or greenhouse gas emissions or crashes, or I just attended a session by the EPA yesterday that demonstrated the correlation between redlining and flooding risk, urban heat islands, tree coverage. And really those are being exacerbated by the historical legacy of intensity and density in historically Black neighborhoods that were zoned multifamily and for industrial uses. So in a lot of ways, yeah, I do see the historical legacy being played out in contemporary planning practice and policy. Definitely. I hope that answers your question.
Actually, I'm talking about some brand new comprehensive plan changes that are being considered by Tampa City Council that would apply to a select few neighborhoods. I don't profess to know all the details about it. I'm coming in late to the conversation, but what I hear is very reminiscent to the information you've just shared this morning.
Yeah, I'm not very up to date on it. My understanding, the South Tampa has historically been a single family area, and it's historically been white and upper middle class. And so I think given that legacy, the continuation of anti-density, anti-intensity policies definitely fits within that historical context of single family zoning in predominantly white upper class neighborhoods.
I know that Hillsborough County, oh, sorry, Christine. I know that Hillsborough County is, put out an RFP to do an equity profile, and the city of Tampa is doing their move with the Vision Zero, and the different jurisdictions are looking now at equity. And I think all of this is an opportunity for policy change, to say, hey, you're looking at equity, so let's actually carry it out through policy.
And I definitely would like to see, as our policymakers consider actions moving forward, to consider the historical legacy of these planning practices and how they play out in contemporary outcomes.
I'm not sure that that's happening right now, so I guess I might ask Mr. Chairman or Rich, can we put on our next month agenda to really look closely at what's happening in the city council in terms of, are they in fact renewing some of these bad practices? Like right now, at present time, is this on the table for possible, are we going to look back and say, boy, that was really bad that happened? Because it just looks and smells a lot like what you've shared with us today. Very subtle, hidden agenda discrimination. So
Okay, thank
can we
you.
put that on a future agenda? Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. We'll record that request, see what information we can bring back, particularly as it relates to MPO and transportation issues within the city. So Joshua and Dana, both thank you for an excellent report. Lots of good information there. I would hope that you would come back before the final report is issued or after it is available and bring that forward to this committee as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
And I want to mention that Terrence Trott has joined us. Thank you very much, Terrence, for joining us here in person. So we now have a quorum. Given that circumstance, I'd like to move back to action items on our agenda. We have two that are to be considered for action. The first is the nomination of an alternate for an under 30 representative, and I think Rich Clarett is going to guide us through that one. Rich?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You want to handle the approval of minutes first, Mr. Chairman?
Pardon me?
You want to handle the minutes first?
Oh, yes, yeah. Let's go back and do the minutes. Let me move further up on the agenda and address the question of the minutes of the last meeting. The minutes have been circulated in your packet. Are there any comments or corrections to be made to the minutes at this time? I see no hands and I see no one in the room wanting to make them. Rich, do we need to do a roll call or can I do this by acclamation?
You can do it by voice vote.
Yeah, I think we can do this by voice vote. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
I will.
Okay.
Did she-
Amy Espinoza moves. Is there a second? Barbara seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes of the previous meeting, please say aye.
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 Aye. Is there any opposition? Right, thank you. Hearing no opposition, the minutes are approved unanimously. And now we'll move into our action items. Rich, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope everybody can hear me. Apologize for any echo. I know sitting in the room for the first time, what everybody's been going through that's attending in person. Anyway, the first action item we have is to consider nominating somebody to serve as the alternate for the at-large under 30 person who's under age 30 representative on the CAC. Last month, if you recall, we had three very eager and willing candidates to join the CAC. One was appointed as the business representative. Another was appointed as their alternate. And the suggestion was made that the third person, who was Jonathan Knudsen, might be willing and able to serve as the alternate for the under 30 representative. So that's the proposal on the table. And I think we can do this by simple motion and second and voice vote. Yes.
I asked Rich while I was muted if he's agreed to serve, and he has. Is there a motion to make that nomination of Jonathan Knutson as the alternate for the under 30 representative?
I'll move.
I'll move.
Ed Mazursky has made the motion. Is there a second? Second,
I'll second.
Amy Espinoza, seconds. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Heard the recommendation. We have a motion. All those in favor of the appointment moving to the MPO for approval, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed?
Aye.
I oppose.
And who is that opposing?
Fernandez.
Okay, Mr. Fernandez, thank you. Well, the motion passes with one vote in opposition. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next action item, which is the TIP amendment for the I-4 frame project. I think we have representative from DOT, and Vishaka Roman is also here from the PO staff. Vishaka, are you going to lead this discussion?
Good morning, committee. Yes, Vishaka Shivaraman, MPO staff, I'm present. And I think the first part of the presentation would be presented by Megan Araste. She's the FDOT representative and the project manager for this project. So I would like to hand it over to her. And Rich, if you could get the presentation up and running. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome, Megan.
Chair, point of clarification.
Yes, Nicole.
And I apologize for doing this. I had a hard time hearing through my audio for a second. Was the confirmation that we were just voting on, I lost part of the audio. Is that the under 30, is that the candidate that was associated with the firm that had contracts?
I don't recall the answer to that question.
Is there anyone who could clarify in regards to that?
Rich is
That would be a
indicating
yes.
yes.
Okay, I absolutely oppose that nomination.
So you'd like to record your vote as a no?
Yes, I would, absolutely.
Okay, I'll ask that the minutes reflect that there were two.
I would like to make a motion to reopen that conversation. This should be a seat to represent people under 30, not engineering or consulting firms that have contracts for development and infrastructure. This is very concerning to me. This is a very valuable seat. We need to be listening to people under 30 in this community. Is it possible to make a motion to put that back on the table, please, with clarification?
I think the motion is out of order. We've taken a vote. We'll record that your vote is a negative vote, and the motion passed with 2 negative votes. It is an alternate seat for a person under 30, but I appreciate your comments, and they'll be recorded in the minutes.
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. All right, we'll go back to the action item. Megan, you are
Good morning.
recognized. Go ahead.
If I can have the presentation, please.
Well, Megan, the good news is that the first slide is a recommended action, so we're in good shape.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Megan Araste. I'm the Transportation System Management and Operations Program Engineer for Department of Transportation. Today, I would like to present to you about the I-4 frame project. I-4, which is the I-4 Florida's Regional Advanced Mobility Elements Project. Next slide, please.
All right.
Sorry, I don't see the next one. The next slide, please. Thank you. From now on in my presentation, I refer to this project as the I-4 frame project. My presentation includes what the project is about, why the project is needed, where the project infrastructure is, and how will it help with safety and mobility on I-4, and the schedule of the design and construction. Next slide, please. So as many of us know, the vision of the department is to promote safety, mobility, and innovation. And this project is the project that's going to make our trip more reliable and safe. How are we going to do this? It's going to be done through connected vehicle and intelligent transportation system technologies. What are these technologies? Simply, there's technologies that allows vehicles to vehicles talk to each other, and vehicles talk to the infrastructure that we are building with this project. Next slide, please. As we all know, I-4 is a vital artery for economic activities. It's east to west coast, and it starts, from Tampa region in the Tampa Bay area to Orlando and back. Orlando is a very important destination for the Americans. About 75 million visited Orlando in 2018. Approximately 151,000 vehicles travel there in this corridor daily. Looking at the crash data between 2016 and 2018, there were 45 fatal crashes and 2,081 injury crashes. Why is that important? Because the fatal crashes in general close I-4 either in one direction or both directions for 4 hours. And I-4 in average has 2 lane closure events per day, 1 full directional closure every 11 days in 2018. So in summary, why are we doing this? Is because FDOT vision is to increase the safety and the mobility on I-4. And really what we want is a safe I-4. And right now, as you see from the statistics, there's a crash history, there's a congestion history, and this project will help to solve the unreliable congestion and improve safety. Next slide, please. On the bottom left is Tampa, and then it's the route on I-4 to Orlando. You see a lot of red on this slide. What I wanted to communicate on this slide is these are all the locations for crashes. And there's a lot of stop and go, and a lot of the stop and go will impact the rate of the crashes, and it creates a lot of rear end crashes. So the goal of this project is to minimize the congestion and also the crashes, and hence increase mobility and safety. Next slide, please. So where is the I-4 frame project? It is the project between, as I've mentioned before, Tampa to Orlando. It's going to encompass 77 miles on I-4 between Tampa and Orlando. It's going to include 200 miles of arterials, which is basically they're the surface streets between these areas. We're going to communicate with 381 traffic signals. And again, what's important about this project is the devices that are going to be installed through this region, and it gives us the abilities to the cars to be talking to the signals, the cars to be talking to each other, and this is just a basic concept of this project. Next slide, please. Where is the I-4 frame project again? This slide has a lot of lines on it, and I understand that it can be a little bit busy, but the intent of this slide is to show you that there are 4 major projects, which is District 7, District 1, District 5, and Florida Turnpike. And the last one, which is a project that's going to be included with District 7, is the State Road 60 CAV project. What I'd like you to look at is on the left side, you see in brown the I-4 interstate, and in teal you see the secondary roads that are included in the I-4 frame, and also the teal is the primary, and the secondary is the teal that's dashed, and also the green is the State Road 60. In D7, this project encompasses 25 miles of I-4, 80 miles of arterials, and the arterials that are included are Hillsborough Avenue, again, which is the teal color on the left side, and the secondary, which is MLK, 30 miles, and 30 miles of State Road 60, and 3 miles of the Florida Turnpike. This information is shown in each of those blocks that are related to each of our districts. We live in the Tampa Bay region. Obviously, we are interested in the projects in District 7. However, the project in District 7 also includes the project in District 1, because the projects in District 1 are managed through the Regional Transportation Management Center in Tampa. And for instance, in District 1, it's 30 miles of I-4 and 100 miles of arterials. I have included District 5 and the Turnpike because, after all, this is a regional project. So it's important to us as a region, and I wanted you to know that there are, for instance, in District 5, there's 22 miles of I-4, 30 miles of arterials, 10 miles of Turnpike. Next slide, please. I'm sure everyone here at one time or another, like myself, has spent some time on I-4 sitting and waiting for the congestion to be relieved. It can be frustrating, it can be loss of time, and it affects our economy. The primary goal of this project is to give the traveling public an alternate route. Not just an alternate route, but also telling you which alternate route will help you with your destination and will minimize the travel time that if you use that route, what time of travel time you'll be looking to get to your destination. Not only we're going to, for instance, if you're on I-4 on the left side, and you're on I-4 and in District 7, and there is a congestion. So we're going to tell you that, okay, if you're staying on I-4, it could take you 1.5 hours to get to your destination. However, they give you an alternate to use the teal road, which is Hillsborough Avenue. We also tell you what time, that you're going to be experiencing to get to your destination. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to work with cities and the counties that manage those signals and give them heads up that the traffic from I-4 now will be using Hillsborough Avenue in this area. And their signal timing for the signals on Hillsborough that has already been set, and the counties and the cities managing these signals will start using that. Now, Hillsborough gets congested too. Then the next one is the timing that's given for MLK, and so on to State Road 60. So all of this is about giving the traveler an option in case of backup. And also this will reduce, because the backup has been reduced, it also reduces the crashes and the congestion. As far as District 1 and District 5 is the same. District 5 is shown as the red solid is the primary road and the dash is the secondary. And in District, I'm sorry, yeah, we need to go back to that slide, please. So District 1 and 5 have the same concept. Again, what is going to happen with this project is that allows the vehicles to talk to each other, and the vehicle devices also, the vehicle devices also communicate with the infrastructure that we're building. And as an overall, this is the vision of this project. So let's go to the next slide, please. I wanted to have a simple concept of what all the different devices are on this project. And there are many, but just the two major ones you see, there's a roadside unit called roadside unit. That's going to be installed on signal poles or other locations that are available to install the roadside units. Then the other one is the onboard unit. The onboard unit is going to be a device that's going to be in the vehicle. So what does this show? This shows basically, it's a cartoon that shows simply, for instance, if you're one of the red cars, you see the dash line between the cars. So because there's a device on the in the car, they're going to communicate with each other. And you know, whether they're going to communicate, they're communicating location, they're communicating speed and other information. This at the same time, that red car is also communicating with their roadside unit. And last but not least, it's also, as you see, the car and the pedestrians are communicating. Why does this matter? Because the pedestrians might be jaywalking or on the crosswalk, and we're going to be able to have the vehicle know that you know, the vehicle to be aware of it and make sure there's no incident with the pedestrian. So we looked at this as an overall in a very simplified manner. So next, let's go and look at these units and see what is it actually, how did it look like? So next slide, please. So here, the top left is the roadside unit. As you remember, I mentioned the roadside units that we're going to install on the signals or other poles that we can install. They're not intrusive at all. You will hardly notice them on these poles. And the function of the roadside units, it's a wireless communication between roadway infrastructure and the vehicles that are equipped with the onboard units. The middle black box is the onboard unit. This is a device that's going to be installed in your vehicle to be able to allow to communicate with the roadside unit. And the last one is a detection device. So I'm sure, like myself, in the beginning when I started this project, I was wondering how all these things are going to happen and what is included in this communication that we're talking about. Now, some of us could be very young in this group. Some of us remember 20 years ago when we had very fat, big TVs, And, then we transitioned to high definition TVs and when they came along. The fact was, not all of us were ready to go to high definition TV and, make that investment, or, I liked my old TV. I was attached to it. So at that time, we had a little box that converted the old TV to the new signal for high definition. And that allowed us to use the old TV. So until we transitioned to flat screen TVs. This is the same concept. For our vehicles, the black box that I mentioned, the onboard unit is going to be available and it could be installed in the cars. And until the time that, let's say, we make a decision to buy a new car. Now, I have to also mention that not necessarily all these units are even in the new cars. The first ones that are coming out, it's going to be year 2022. And for instance, other manufacturers like Ford, they're working on these units. Next slide, please. Just wanted to, as an overall, show you this figure because this is what what's happening in the field as far as infrastructure. All these dots that you see in different colors are going to be devices that we're going to install with the I-4 frame project and with the State Road 60 CAV project. And there are a lot of units. So I just wanted you to know as a magnitude, there's going to be almost at every intersection and many of the crosswalks, or so just as an overall, this is where the project is going to be implemented. Next slide, please. So we're going to be talking to other vehicles. And the question is, what are we going to communicate back and forth between our vehicles, onboard units, and the roadside units? What we're going to communicate is going to be traffic management and traffic incident management. We're going to broadcast traffic incident information to vehicles, maintenance areas that are areas of roadway that could be being maintained, or construction areas. We're going to communicate emergency response and evacuation information. Next one, we're going to communicate speed harmonization message system. Broadcast vehicle speed advisory to warn drivers of reduced speed, recommendations on the roadway and the condition ahead. Why is this important? Because, whenever, for instance, I am driving and I see on a DMS sign, congestion ahead, reduce speed, it gives me heads up and it reduces rear end crashes. Then we're going to communicate war zone traffic management. We live in Florida, and Florida has a lot of roadways under construction, and there's a lot of funding that becomes available, and we use that funding for better roads. This system also broadcasts information on back of queue, roadway hazard, roadway condition, and the location of the work zones. The freeway back of queue warning, it tells us really it's time to slow down and stop. So in another word, if you're coming around the curve and lo and behold, everything stops, you want to know this in advance. And this will help with, again, reducing the crashes and reducing any congestion that's resulting from that, and a safer roadway. Wrong way driving, there are two, this is a two-pronged approach with the I-4 frame. The first approach is what we all know, that there's a lot of wrong way driving in the Tampa Bay region. And the communication is going to be that if there's a wrong way driver, there are a lot of instruments right now that are on our off ramps on I-275, I-75, and I-4. Now these devices the onboard unit will know that there's a wrong way driver, and it notifies those devices, and those devices have edge lights, and those edge lights, they come on and hopefully informs the wrong way driver that you're wrong way driving and you need to turn around. And this is both with the units, with the devices that are already on the off ramps, and also the onboard unit that you have also tells you that there's a wrong way driving driver on the road, and it gives you that notice so you can make a decision as far as maybe you want to get off of the first exit that you come near. So it has a two-pronged approach. Again, freight management, broadcast traffic management information to freight vehicles, and it broadcasts availability of rest areas, and any other specific information that's important to freight management. And lastly, predictive analytics. It's just it's in infancy. There's a lot of good work that's going on with this concept, and continuously predicts crashes based on the history of the region. And as I said, this is it's in infancy as far as predictive analytics for the I-4 frame. Next slide. Again, the two projects that are in District 7 are the I-4 frame and State Road 60 CAV project. And these projects are currently under design. The design completion would be in November of 2021. The contractor will be selected in February 2022. And the budget is $11.5 million for the first project, and the second project, the connected vehicle project, is $1.7 million. The next three are the projects in District 1, District 5, and Florida Turnpike. These projects are again in design, and the design will be completed in March of 2022, and the contractor selection, which starts the construction, is in July of 22. And the cost is 9.3, 3.7 in District 5, and $1 million in for the Turnpike projects. Next slide, please. We have selected the consultant who is working on these projects. The consultant is Metric Engineering, and as you saw, they're actively working on the design. Again, the design completion for the District 7 is November of 2021. For the D1, D5, and Florida Turnpike is March of 22. Construction will begin June of 22 for District 7, and for D1, D5, it's October of 22. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Vishaka, did you want to add anything to the presentation before I open it for questions?
Yes, Chair. I don't have anything to bring up to you. I can pull the comparative report, which is what we used, and I can show you the detailed funding if you would like to see that. If not, Megan has given an awesome presentation, very detailed. So if you would want, you could go ahead and approve that. I just have an official slide asking you a request for approval.
Okay, excellent. Let's take questions from the committee of Megan regarding her presentation, if there are questions. Mr. Fernandez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Are you able to hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Megan, okay, I see you over here on the postage stamp. Thank you for that. Very interesting presentation. One of the things I most enjoy about being on this committee is that I'm usually the first person on my block to hear about stuff like this. So news to me, but interesting. I actually have a few questions. I'll leave it to the chair to decide when he wants to cut me off. Hopefully they won't take long to get through. First of all, I want to be clear from your presentation as to the District 7 impacts. I heard three roadways mentioned: Martin Luther King, Hillsborough, and State Road 60. Are those the three arteries that would be impacted in terms of installation of hardware and the like for control by this program?
Yes, sir. The devices will be installed on the primary would be Hillsborough, and the secondary roads are MLK and State Road 60. And if I could, there was a slide that I showed all the devices. There were circles. Just briefly went over it. It shows all the devices on that slide.
Okay, thank you.
And
Megan,
yes, ma'am.
Megan, this is Dr. Knox. Can I jump in as well?
Yes,
I
would also,
on the team.
I would like to mention that Jessica Knox is with Metric Engineering, and she has been working on the project. And yes, Jessica, go ahead.
Jessica, if you would follow our procedure and raise your hand and be recognized, we'll be glad to recognize you. Please go ahead.
Absolutely. Sorry about that. I just wanted to add in that there are some other roadways that you would see in that map, and they're most of our roadways that are going to be going from south to north to get you up to Hillsborough into MLK or down to State Road 60. So there are additional roadways within the district, but the main roadways, as Megan mentioned, will be Hillsborough, MLK, and State Road 60. So I just wanted to add that. We do have infrastructure on quite a few roadways.
We can also, if you like to see it on one of the slides, slide number 7 does show it. Does show the parallel roadways to I-4, which is Hillsborough, MLK, and State Road 60, and then you see the connected roadways between I-4 and those roadways. And again, as far as the infrastructures, you saw how the infrastructure is really very small based on what I presented as far as what's an the onboard units or what you see in as far as the roadside units.
Rick?
Okay, is that it by way of your answer? I'll move on to the next question if it is.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Second question, has this system been initiated anywhere else in the country? And if so, what results have been found?
I can tell you that as far as this, District 7, District 1, and District 5 and Turnpike is, these were given by FHWA through a grant to the department. And it's we are in the leading edge of these type of technologies. But Jessica, go ahead if as far as any other place in the country.
Sure. Actually, right in your guys' backyard, SIA has a pilot. The Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority has a pilot for this CV technology. They're already doing it on the Selman Expressway, as well as in downtown Tampa today. So the RSUs are already talking to OBUs, their onboard units today, and that evaluation plan and an after study is being done right now. We should have the entire results. It's been very positive. They've also been done nationwide. There's a bunch of different pilots in Columbus, Ohio, as well as out west. And currently in Florida, we have quite a few CV projects going on. One in the Gainesville area, we did the design and it's in operation now, called the Gainesville Trapezium Project, that goes basically all the way around the University of Florida. We also have I-75 frame, which is through District 5 and District 2 along I-75. And then right now we're also doing some additional ones in District 1 for US 41 frame. So there's definitely quite a few going on. We're testing all kinds of different technology to see how they work. Currently, the FCC did just make a ruling that the DSRC, which is what's been used like on the SIA pilot, that's a radio frequency. We're moving more towards a cellular frequency, cellular communications. And so all of these different things are being tested right now to see what would work best. But yes, there's been plenty of projects ongoing at this time.
Okay, and is there data available vis-a-vis those various projects that are being considered locally before this price point is met?
Yes, we can provide, as soon as we have the evaluation from the SIA study. It's actually in FHWA's hands for review right now. I'm sure that data can be provided. As far as the other national, pilots that have been done, I'm sure we can find that for you. But FHWA is very aware of a lot of the different data that's out there and the outcomes thus far, and are very positive moving forward. And that's why they've issued quite a few grants in the connected vehicle technology realm.
Okay, well, just speaking as a local, I hope that information is being provided to the appropriate entities here in Hillsborough County to decide whether or not this valuable resource of funding should be utilized in this way. It strikes me if we're, it sounds on the one hand we're cutting edge, on the other we're really not. There are some people out there already that are inventing the wheel, if you will. So I hope that data will be provided, should be, and I would like to see it myself on this committee at some point, preferably sooner rather than later if we're being asked to approve something like this.
Or we can provide that information.
Okay, thank you. What is the critical mass of vehicles that would need to be enabled by this technology in order for it to have any anticipated or hoped for impact on roadway congestion? Let's take the whole pie of 100% of cars on our roads. What percentage of that 100% will have to be enabled in order for this to make a difference?
Again, you want to address that
Megan,
question?
would you like me to take that?
Yes, go ahead, and then I'll chime in.
Okay. So we do know that the penetration rate of the onboard units would be very minimal at first. We're probably only outfitting, some of the local fleets of City of Tampa, some of the different local agencies, as well as FDOT vehicles, some transit vehicles, and some freight vehicles. This is to get us until the OEMs, the different manufacturers of vehicles, they're going to start having onboard units actually built into the cars. Ford is already guaranteed by next year they're going to be built into the cars, as well as some of the other manufacturers, Toyota, Nissan, I think. And so this will eventually, just like she was talking about PVs, it'll start to move over, and within the next 10 years, most of our vehicles will all have onboard units in them already. And then as far as the actual impact, the reason why we're adding some of this additional infrastructure is because those onboard units won't have that penetration rate that you're talking about. We've added some supplementary systems there to help with safety. For the wrong way driving, we have an actual system that you'll see versus it just coming through on an onboard unit if you're on, if the vehicle is not equipped. There's additional secondary systems we could talk about that we're also putting in for that. You hit a good point though. Until the penetration rate is quite higher, that the extreme safety benefit will not be seen. Well, it will be seen, but it will not be as beneficial. You won't be getting an alert in your car to tell you this information until we get to probably upwards of over 50% penetration rate, which will take some time.
And to me, this is the thing. We all had a lot of cell phones, right? And we didn't have smartphones. It takes a while for the public to, not necessarily everyone is going to be looking at a new car like myself. No, I wouldn't be. So I would want to have a unit in my car, the onboard unit, the smart box that I can put in my car. And that this is going to be something that, like any of the other apps that we use, for instance, getting used to Google Maps and finding for getting to destination. It's just going to take a while to get there, but it's something that is very important. Why is it important? Because based on the statistics, 80% of the crashes and the incidents, traffic incidents, are related to human error. So that's why this project is very important.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee?
Could I add one last thing, Bill, or Mr. Chairman?
Please, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to add as well that on the supplementary system, the entire point of this project is really for, if I-4 were to shut down in one direction, can we divert traffic off and not put them onto a saturated roadway? And so even without the OBU, as long as we know where that closure is going to take place, this is moving towards an integrated corridor management system. So what we're doing is we're also putting in blank out signs to then help divert traffic. You don't have to have an onboard unit to see those, to help show you which direction to go to get to your Hillsborough Avenue or your MLK or your State Road 60. And so those signs will also assist with that. From an actual signal timing perspective, we'll also have signal timing engineers that are pushing those plans to basically flush those roadways and all those cars through in order for you to be able to have a more reliable trip time and not sitting in the traffic on I-4 for hours at a time. Say if there's a fatal crash, the typical time period is about 4 hours that the roadway is closed down. And so, or at least multiple lane closures for that investigation. So this will still help you in that side without having an OBU penetration. And those cars will just help us to gauge those travel times at the, during that time period, and some other key metrics to help with the signal timing. But the operations will still be there without the OBU penetration at this time.
Okay, thank you. Nikki, you have a question?
Hi, thank you. If you could help me understand why we would jump to something of this nature and cost versus investing in upgrading our current control centers for signal priority, considering that right now, I mean, we actually got to go as a committee to take a trip to see the one at FIA and see what was going on, and there was minimal cameras. Why would we jump to something like this and make an assumption that 20 years, once people have this so-called technology in their vehicles, it's going to pay off?
For me, I go back to the same thing that, these are more, right now, we don't have the system that communicates the information from the cars to cars and from cars to the signals. We don't have that. As Jessica said, this system also includes additional units where it gives the public the notice as far as alternative routes. But this will allow, there's another level of communication that we can all use. For instance, I could use this information that we get from Waze as far as the traffic, but it's not as detailed as this what's going to be included in this project. And the main thing that I go back to is 80% of the incidents are as a result of an error or a mistake by the driver. This will give the drivers a lot more notice about what they're going to encounter.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I think that maybe my question wasn't clear enough, and I apologize, Megan. Why are we investing in making assumptions that drivers are going to have technology versus upgrading our current notification systems on current roads, or adjusting the way that we do our actual pre-existing signals to create better flow of traffic? It seems like that would be a better first step than making long-term investment in what might be technology going forward with vehicles.
I can give
Megan,
you
if I could,
responses for that, and Jessica, you can go ahead, chime in.
Sure. I'd like to say that included in this project, we are doing some of those upgrades as well. We're upgrading the signal controllers at every single one of these locations to an advanced transportation controller, which can do a lot more of the adaptive signal controlling timing as vehicles go through there. So we are upgrading that. We're also adding cameras at almost every single intersection, which will go back to those traffic management centers, whether it's to the local agency's traffic management center or to the RTMC for District 7, the regional traffic management center. We're also adding some additional devices like Bluetooth readers out there as well. And at the TMC level, we're also upgrading firewalls and things of that nature, as well as switches. So there is other upgrades. We just focused on the connected vehicle side of this, but there is a lot more that's going on because we are saying we're trying to make sure those supplementary systems are there to see that safety benefit today versus the penetration rate.
Where's that information about the traffic safety plan though in this plan? Because I don't see that, and if you could please speak to that, because it's missing that huge chunk of how we're going to restructure the way that we do signal and traffic priority, how we're going to restructure and reconnect these centers to each other, make sure they're talking to each other. So if you could please clarify why that's not the priority first when we talk about funding versus this being the priority. And that's really all. That's what I wanted to point out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we can get you more details if you would like, Nikki.
Yeah, I think that's a question that, that maybe Megan can come back with. I'm going to take two more questions. Stephen Hollenkamp, you had a question. You still there?
I am still here. Thank you, Chair. So, you know, this may be a little bit too detailed. You guys may not know, but in Plant City, so these secondary arterials in Hillsborough County, one of them is MLK/US 92, and it runs through downtown Plant City. And when it comes through Plant City, it switches and is two one-ways. We have two one-ways going through our downtown, and they're both 2 lanes. And over the last few years, our city's been working hard to just slow down the cars while balancing the interests of FDOT that like having these roads as a diversion or a backup for I-4. And so they're doing all sorts of things. They're adding bump outs to the roads. They're changing the signal timing so that the lights are not timed where you can just fly through, and we have people doing 50 through our downtown. And so they're trying to feather them where people will be forced to stop. And it's all in efforts to slow down traffic through our downtown so that people feel safe walking on these roads, so that we can get commercial businesses that can succeed there. 40% of the commercial properties are vacant that are along US 92/MLK going through downtown Plant City. And a lot of that's because people don't feel comfortable walking with cars flying by at 50 miles an hour. Okay. The question is, do you know if they're going to be feathering or these 381 traffic signals? Does that include the traffic signals in downtown Plant City?
Jessica?
Megan, I can take that if you don't mind. We actually worked very hard and long with Fred Baxter as well as his team of chief engineers in Plant City. And originally we did have a diversion route that avoided the downtown area as a primary route and basically went down Park Avenue and around, to Alexander. And our first set of plans actually included that as the primary route. After it went through a review, again, with the new chief engineer that's in Plant City today, that has changed. They do want to make the primary route through downtown at this time. And so we have gone ahead and we've included some upgrades there as far as some cabinet upgrades, avoiding, going around, down and around. They just assume most people are really not going to go down around Google or Waze, or somebody's going to take them through downtown anyway. So they would rather upgrade some of that infrastructure to go ahead and be able to handle those additional cars that go through there. Now with those controller upgrades, as we said, the timings will then adapt depending on the diversion route that is in place. And so we'll be able to flush cars through there, and hopefully it won't, be a long-term closure and disrupt any businesses. But that is something that we've worked with them on, and that they did want us to go ahead and do is to go through there. And we do know it's 2 one-way roads, on Reynolds and Baker.
Yeah, okay.
Stephen, if you need to get with your local engineering people, maybe they can help you clear up the problem. Terrence Stott has a question.
Thank you.
I think you're muted.
Yep, if there are no more questions, I was just going to make the motion if necessary.
All right. I'm going to ask if we can end the questioning. I have one question I'd like to direct to Jessica, and then I'm going to entertain a motion. Jessica, is any of this funding intended to provide the onboard units for people in this area who might like to take advantage of this system earlier rather than later?
As of right now, the funding that you see in the TIP, as well as the federal funding that we have from the grant, it is not including the OBU or the OBU outfitting. They are talking about that right now in central office for some additional funding from the procurement stage, which I don't know if that's included in the numbers you have here. I apologize, I'm not familiar with the different funding silos, but that is something they're looking for is how to go ahead and outfit vehicles, as well as an open to the public so that we can get a couple pilot OBUs outfitted there as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. Ms. Shako, we're at a point where I think we're ready to entertain action on this item. Did you want to make any additional comments before I entertain a motion?
No, Chair, thank you so much. I think I'm good. We can,
Good.
you're all ready for the recommended action. That'll be helpful.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you. Thank you very much. Jessica and Megan, we appreciate you coming and taking your time. As you can tell, the committee's pretty engaged. I'm sure there will be more questions as this project proceeds. Terrence Trott, can I recognize you for a motion?
Yes, please. I'd like to make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve the amendment to the TIP for the I-4 frame project. It is, if memory serves me correctly, it is about a $10 million addition to the TIP. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ed Majerski is the second. Is there any further discussion on the motion? I think on this one, I'd like to ask for a roll call vote. Cheryl, if you're available, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Bill Roberts,
Yes.
Barbara Kennedy Gibson. Yes. Terrence Trott,
Yes, I made the motion.
Carolyn Brown, Carolyn.
She's voting yes. You can't hear her.
Okay, thank you. Amy Espinosa,
Yes.
Ed Majerski,
Yes.
Beatrice Zafra,
Yes.
Stephen Hollenkamp,
Yes.
Rick Fernandez,
No.
Christina Costa,
No.
Artie Fryer,
Yes.
Rick Richmond,
Yes.
Don Skelton Jr.,
Yes.
Alexis Bobak,
Yes.
Cliff Reese,
Yes.
Nicole Rice.
No.
Okay, motion carries 13-3. The
All right,
noes
well-
were Rick Fernandez, Christina Costa, and Nicole Wright.
Thank you. Betty, I appreciate you taking the time to hear this presentation. I think all of us would agree that anything we can do that is realistic to improve the conditions on I-4 is a welcome sign of relief. So thank you again, Megan and Jessica, for your presentation. That concludes our 2 action items. I'd like to move into unfinished business. The first item in that section is a report on our ad hoc subcommittee. Amy, would you like to take this one?
Yes, thank you. The subcommittee met, I'm sorry, I don't remember the date exactly. It was on a Friday afternoon. And what we did was kind of opened it up for a discussion of what we feel should be improved to help us understand the language of the TIP and the concept of the TIP. Johnny Wong from the MPO or from the Planning Commission was there as well. We learned that he will be handling the TIP this year. He is very dedicated to ensuring that he provides as much clarity as possible In fact, I'm not sure if he's here today, but his plan was to possibly reach out to our committee to get some more information on what the entire committee feels needs to be clarified, and has committed to introduce the tip to us for discussion before our meeting in May to the committee, so that we can kind of help him clarify things that may need to be a little bit more understandable. So our next meeting will be May 3rd. And we will be looking over the tip information that will be sent out to the entire committee on the 28th, and to see what we can do to help improve it, if anything. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Amy, and thanks for chairing this subcommittee. Are there questions of Amy regarding the subcommittee report and its plans moving forward? I'm not seeing any hands. So, Amy, thank you. We look forward to hearing from you after the May 1st meeting. Yeah,
Chair, this is Johnny. I can't figure out how to raise my hand, but I was hoping that I could say a couple words.
Please do, John.
And also give out some dates, because I think that there's a few important topics that we need to cover regarding the tip. As Amy mentioned, we did meet about a week and a half ago. The working group was very great about providing a lot of feedback. Thankfully, a lot of these suggestions that they made were already underway. For me, managing the tip this year, my goal is to make it simple and brief. In a word, the tip document as it exists today, I think, is confusing. Maybe overly complex is a better way to describe it. And I think it was really impactful for all of us to hear feedback from the working group that, in their words, understanding the tip is the most intimidating part of being on the CAC. Not only because it's quite a responsibility and they take it very seriously, but they also have a strong desire to learn about what the tip processes are, understand the projects. And so we already got a lot of great feedback from them. Just in a nutshell, we heard that it would be better to simplify the tip. They want it to be better structured so that you all can understand what kind of projects you're looking at, what are the characteristics of each of the projects that appear. You'd also like to better understand the relationship between the UPWP, the tip, and the long-range plan. And like I said, a lot of these issues are already in the process of being corrected. So we're making really good progress. There's a couple of dates that I want to share with you all. In years past, I know that the CAC has mentioned that it's kind of difficult to go over the entire tip document during one committee meeting. So this year, we're going to try to bring it to you at 2 separate meetings. The first date that we're going to bring it to you will be, let's see, May 5th. So you all have a committee meeting on Wednesday, May 5th. The working group, myself, Rich, and Beth are going to be meeting on Monday evening, 2 days before that meeting. And we're going to get some additional feedback from you all about the changes we've made. Then on that Wednesday, we're going to be presenting the updated document to you all in draft form. And then we're going to be bringing it back again on June 2nd. That one will be for action. So you're going to have a chance to proof it and then just have it be more like an open conversation where you tell us what you like and what you don't like. We're going to have about a month to make any of those corrections. And then we're going to bring it back to you June 2nd. By then, it will be in near final format. And then, of course, the public hearing to adopt the tip will be on June 9th. So we got a lot going on. We're making progress, trying to address all the concerns we've heard. Of course, we'd like to hear from the entire committee in addition to the working group, but that's kind of where we're at now.
Good update. I see a hand, but I can't see the face. Nicole, is that you? Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Johnny. I wanted to know if you guys in that group had discussed ways to make this easier for the public as well to understand the tip. I find that when I meet people who even work inside of politics, they have no concept of how we allocate funding for these projects. And it makes it very hard for people to advocate. So is that something that could be addressed during the meetings that you're leading? And what are
Yeah,
your
definitely.
thoughts?
It's something that we're pretty conscious about, making it understandable to the general public. I mean, you all are the committee that's supposed to represent the public, but even being on this committee, you're now insiders. Thankfully, we have some new staff at the Planning Commission who are totally new to transportation. They have no idea what the TIP is or long range plan. And one of them actually has a background in copywriting. So she's been a great resource for us. We have other staff who are kind of new to this. And I think the biggest challenge or the biggest testament will be when we open it up to public comment. If we can get it in the hands of the real public, people in the community, if they can read it and then give us feedback, we'll of course do our best to address any of their concerns as well. So I guess like to be concise, yes, we're trying to make it understandable. We're trying to take it from a 100-page document that reads as a very bureaucratic thing to 12 pages.
Right. And do you plan on using different visuals in regard to how that information is presented? Because right now it's just a horrifying Excel spreadsheet that goes on for pages. So I just feel that it would really help if when I'm speaking to people and they're upset because they're not getting A, B, and C, and especially with the surtax and different issues that we have locally, it's very hard to mobilize people to care about this or to understand how very, very this is it. This is the budget. So I just hope that that's a priority, and I know that you know it's an issue. So
Totally sympathize. Yeah, more flow charts, more graphics, less boring text. That's the goal.
Okay. Thanks, Johnny. Any other questions about the subcommittee report? I don't see any other hands. Well, thank you again, Johnny and Amy.
a point of order. Eric Lamb has been raising his hand and has not been recognized multiple times, Chair. I don't know if it's.
Who is that? Oh. Okay. Go ahead.
Hey, one of my questions is privacy concerns and data concerns. Anything that you can address to the public about this, as this is becoming a bigger issue in other industries?
Are you talking about the tip?
Correct. Include like you have to include installed devices on cars. That's going to bring up some privacy concerns with people installing devices.
Chair, I think the question might be directed toward the previous presenters. We're giving an update on the Transportation Improvement Program, which is a forthcoming document. I think you are talking about the I-4 frame, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Okay.
In which case, I'm not sure if the presenters are here or not, but I think I see your question in the chat. So if they're not on now, maybe Rich or myself can forward that question onto the presenters and get you an answer later.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's right, Johnny. I think that question relates to the frame project, and we'll see if we can get you an answer, Eric. Sorry, I didn't see your hand up. Anyone else? All right.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate it, and we look forward to learning more about the simplified tip presentation.
Chair,
yes.
may I make a quick comment? This is Fernandez.
Go ahead.
Just a quick, not a question, just a comment. We have some new people on the committee. I mean, very new, like within the last few days. Those of you that are on this call who are new, who are not already on this subcommittee, assuming there's room at the table, I would suggest that you attend as many of the subcommittee presentations and meetings as possible. Just latch on, like a sucker fish, as often as you can before we have our official meetings in, I guess it's May. So you can become a little more educated on this process before the presentation on the 5th, because despite the subcommittee's best efforts, showing up on May the 5th and having this document presented as a matter of first impression it's a big chunk to chew. So I'd recommend trying to do a little extra study. And if the subcommittee is a place that you could do that, I think you might find that helpful. That's all.
Thank you, Rick. I think that's an excellent suggestion. Barbara, I'm sorry, Amy, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. The whole purpose for organizing this subcommittee was to make it more understandable to us and to the public. We do have Carolyn, who is new, and also Beatrice on our committee. So just for informational purposes, we have them with us as well.
Good.
Chair.
Yes, Nicole.
I think that what has just been proven is when we were discussing the tip with Eric or certain people, there's a lack of even comprehension of like what it is. So I think that maybe if we could have, I don't know if Johnny's still on this call. I don't see him, but if we could maybe clarify real quick before we come back to hear what this committee has been working on, which is awesome, why this matters, what it is specifically in minute terms, and what power we have to rearrange or try to reprioritize for the board when they go to vote on the issues that are coming forward. Because I think a lot of times people think they have to accept how it's laid out. We do have an opportunity to reprioritize issues. So Johnny, would you mind speaking to that for people who don't quite comprehend it yet?
Sure, yeah, I'll give a brief synopsis, and I'll lean on Rich to chime in if I'm overlooking anything. So the MPO is in charge of doing long range planning. Long range in this case might mean 20 or 25 years. That's a really long time horizon, and we can't list out in detail all of the projects that will be constructed over a 25-year period. So we break it down into smaller increments. The Transportation Improvement Program is a 5-year horizon. So it's the first 5 years of a long-range 25-year plan, right? So with the 5-year tip, we can go into a lot more detail about all of the projects. You can see what the phases are. You can see how much money is dedicated to each phase, all the way from planning through construction. And each year we get project proposals from our local governments who are hoping to work with us to get funding for those projects. We call them priorities, right? If we evaluate the project and we see that it has the potential to make a huge impact on some problem that we're facing, we prioritize them. So what the tip ultimately yields is a ranked list of the projects that could make the biggest impact on problems like safety or congestion or infrastructure condition and a handful of others. We'll go into a lot more detail about that at the May meeting, but that's just kind of like a primer for what to expect.
Yeah, and
Amy, go ahead.
to answer your question about what we discussed in that meeting in a little bit more detail, I just didn't want to overload everybody because we've been here for a while. Some of the topics that we had asked to become more clear was the prioritization, perhaps a review of last year and the new year, how it and how those tie into the project categories. There's 6 project categories that have been defined by the Planning Commission or MPO. Sorry if I got that confused. Shared language that is understandable, and also, I'll just give one more, which was, sorry, I'm looking through my notes. Equity, call out equity islands early on the tip. So that hopefully will give you a little bit more information.
Good. Thanks, Amy. And for those new members, let me just add, and for our members who've been on the committee a while. There are several opportunities during the year for this committee to make direct recommendations to the MPO Board of Directors. They decide the policy and they select the programs that are going to affect transportation in our county. The approval of the Transportation Improvement Program occurs each June. We receive that proposal that Dr. Wong just outlined in May, and we usually take a meeting or two to study it. We now have the advantage of a subcommittee who's going to give us a jump start on analyzing and understanding that. But this is an opportunity for this committee, representing your various constituencies, to dive deeply into what is planned over the next 5 years, to ask questions, and to develop a sense of direction and recommendation to the MPO board. And I think it's a fair statement to say that they take our recommendations seriously, and we have often been able to change the course of individual projects within the TIP. So with that said, again, Amy, thank you, and Johnny, thank you for your help. If there are no further questions about the activity of the subcommittee, I think that the next meeting will be another good one. I'd like to move, the next item on our agenda is the report on the T-BARTA Citizens Advisory Committee. Rick Richmond, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. There was no T-BARTA meeting scheduled for last month, and I did give an update at our last meeting. The next meeting will take place April 14th, next Wednesday. So I'll give a report in May.
Okay, very good. I will just add to Rick's report that a reminder that there is a bill proposed in the state Senate to essentially abolish T-BARTA. As of the last time I checked, which was last Friday, that there was still not a companion bill in the House, but that bill from Senator Brandis is still alive. So we'll continue to monitor it. Maybe we'll hear more on Wednesday. Did I see a hand with a question? Nope.
Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
In regards to that Senate bill, that was the question I was going to ask. In order to defund completely, is it going to require that it actually has a House companion bill, or would they be able to, with the right amount of votes, push this through? Which would, in many ways, in my opinion, be a blessing, but I'm just curious what it would require.
Well, my information is that the normal course for bills that get passed in the legislature is that there is a companion bill, one introduced in the House, one in the Senate. If they differ, there is a conference committee, or one House adopts the version of the other. In this case, I'm told that Senator Brandis is fully expected to attach his T-BARTA abolition bill to some sort of a funding bill, possibly even the state budget, and see if he can get it adopted in the Senate that way, which would then send it to the House.
That was my question, because I had heard through our legislative committee that I'm attached to, that there was a way they were going to try to push it through without having to wait on a House bill.
Yeah, and there is a way, and we're waiting to see what developments occur.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else about the T-BARTA situation? The next item on our agenda is a presentation or an update on the county charter surtax. Dr. Wong, are you going to give us this report?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm back. I actually don't have too much to report. I'm sure that you all have heard that the Supreme Court overturned or invalidated the legality of the tax. It's my understanding that the IOC will no longer exist. I've heard chat that there's an initiative to bring it back to the ballot in 2022. Did anyone have any specific questions? I mean, that's just like my general understanding of where we're at.
Yes, Nicole?
I guess my question was really because the ruling had to do with, God forbid, we give actual citizens a right to police their own tax dollars. Why is it just due to funding that we're incapable of going and putting an appeal? I don't know if you know the answer or Rick knows the answer here. Why we're letting it sit like this and having to rely on getting us back on the ballot? Is there anyone who could clarify that? Because the decision was one of the strangest things I've ever seen. So I guess I would just like some clarity as to why we're letting that lie and what's going to happen ultimately with the funding. Because now the public seems super excited, like, well, I can't believe we're going to lose this and that. I'm like, well, yeah, that's what happens when you let this happen. So I'm just wondering what the state of that is. And I know, Rick, you are OC member. Is there anything you can do to clarify this? Because people are asking a lot of questions and it's hard for me to answer them at this point.
I've had a few conversations with the legal counsel to the IOC, Sam Hamilton. I've got an answer that I've gotten many times in the past. We're in a holding pattern. There's still a lawsuit that's being heard. That's the class action lawsuit that was filed by a Temple Terrace resident. So that has yet to be resolved. I'm not sure that we'll see any new updates about strategies to refund the money or what happens to the money until after that.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate response, and I think to partially answer your question, the Board of County Commissioners apparently has the authority to determine what happens to the money that's already been raised, and there is an active group that's working to bring this issue back before the voters in 2022. My understanding is that some, if not a majority, of the county commissioners support that effort. So that's really all I can shed, all the light I can shed on the issue. Terrence, did you have a question?
Oh, no, sir.
Okay. Any other questions about this issue? It's unresolved.
If you have any specific questions, feel free to email them to me and I'll just forward them to Sam Hamilton, see if I can get some responses and share with everyone.
Good. Appreciate that offer. Thank you. Okay. The next item on our agenda is the I-275 Boulevard concept update. Rich, are you going to direct us through this report?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry I had to leave the in-person meeting room. My battery was dying and could not get power on my plug, so I'm back in my office. So I wanted to just reply back to the committee on this item. I think it came up at your March meeting, or maybe even earlier than that, what is going on or what's happening with the concept to convert I-275 to a boulevard. And I think the short answer to that question is it's sort of in a state of suspension at this point. There was a lot of discussion between staff and the MPO board, and also between staff and consultants to try to get a handle on what it would take from a planning perspective to move the concept forward. And the finding really was that it would require a considerable feasibility study, the cost of which was conservatively estimated at upwards of $800,000, which would consume most of our annual consultant budget and leave very little for anything else. The second thing is that last year when we were putting together our unified planning work program, we did a poll of MPO board members asking them what discretionary projects they wanted to fund in the unified planning work program. And the Boulevard study did not receive many votes compared to other projects. So it's kind of down on their priority list in terms of planning projects. And then I think the third factor sort of weighing against it at this point moving forward is it really needs to be complemented with some sort of fixed guideway transit system that would give travelers an effective alternative to making trips on I-275 by auto. So, I wouldn't say that it's dead and gone, but I think we're kind of in a holding pattern on it. And, I think it could come back, but I wouldn't want to hazard a guess as to when that might be. That's my report.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rich. I know, Mr. Fernandez, this was an issue you have brought up several times. Are there any questions about the status report?
I have a question, Chair.
Please, Mr. Fernandez.
Thank you. And this is directed to Rich, if I may.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Rich, I appreciate the report. Not surprising. I think you gave me kind of a peek in advance as to where this was. You used the term suspended animation or suspended, whatever. It was pretty much suspended last year as well. Are we any more suspended today than we were last year? I mean, is it really just a matter of the study that was authorized 2 years ago by the board is in a queue and we'll get to it when we find funding to do it?
Yeah, well, I think it's both a question of finding the funding to do it, as well as taking the pulse of the MPO board. I think ultimately they decide and they direct us as staff what they want us to study.
Well, let me just make one further comment and then I'll shut up. As far as I know, the authorization from 2 years ago is still good. We just haven't moved forward with it. I can acknowledge and accept that. I know there are other things that need to happen before the Boulevard project could even hope to go forward. And we're talking years, maybe decades. I understand that. But there was an issue raised last year regarding the budget. You made reference to a full consultancy budget, I think it was, of $1 million. And I remember when that was presented to us last year, and the Boulevard project study was, I think, the top line item, if I'm visualizing it in my mind's eye, was the top line item in that presentation, and it had a price point of $800,000. And the concern that was raised at that point was that it was basically being presented to fail, because 800,000 out of $1 million, yeah, you're probably not going to want to prioritize that. There was a suggestion made that we break that out and identify a layering, if you will. Somebody used the term feathering earlier. I like that. But break that $800,000, assuming that's even a valid number, into smaller increments, and how it is that we might be able to begin a feasibility study at a smaller price point that would allow the study to progress on some kind of rational basis over a period of years. I don't know if that breakout was ever done, or if the board was simply told it's going to cost $800,000, it's going to cost 800 grand to do a feasibility study. We can't afford to do that with $1 million budget. Was that breakout ever done? Was a smaller price point ever presented?
I don't honestly know the answer to that question, Rick, but I can certainly inquire and get back to you on that.
I'd appreciate it. Hopefully, by some period before we have to consider the tip again, because I know that was an issue, and I know that request was made. I seriously doubt that ever happened, the breakout, I mean. So thank you for listening to me, and I'm sure I won't let this die. I'll keep talking about it. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. Any other comments or questions on the report?
Yes, Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes.
It's Christine.
Yes, Christine.
I reiterate Rick's request that we make the feasibility into bite-sized nuggets, and I would like to suggest, Rich, as you advance that idea, that we make the developable land and commensurate tax revenue phase one of the study. You know, what is it that our community would gain in terms of transportation oriented development benefits? I think to take a bite-sized approach or a feathered approach to the feasibility, I would like to suggest that we float the idea that the very first feasibility phase be that of understanding the developable land and resulting tax revenue for our community that would result.
Okay, good suggestion. Let's be sure the minutes reflect that request, and we'll convey it at the appropriate time. Nikki Rice, you have a question?
I also want to stand behind where Rick and Mr. Costa are on this, because we just discussed and approved $10 million because the flow of traffic is not getting onto and off of I-4 correctly because we have a bottleneck situation. So I think that's when I speak to reprioritizing projects. We have the capacity as a group to determine long-term what is the best solution locally. And that would not be an issue going through that spine if we got rid of the bottleneck. And I do believe that we need to allow Josh Franks the capacity to continue this project with this board, and I would like to make sure that remains a priority. I don't think he's had the opportunity. I don't think it's been presented well to people, and they have no idea what it really is. And when they sit and watch this presentation, it's mind blowing to them.
Okay, Ed, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I appreciate the economic impact, but actually I think the very first thing that needs to be done is a determination of whether it's by transit or arterial streets. How are we going to carry the 180,000 or 200,000 people that are using that? And I think figuring that out will inform what the potential economic development opportunities are.
That's certainly a fair question. I would think that this investigation, I will call it, of the Boulevard concept needs to take into account all of these items. And I would just remind the committee that the RRT plan that is being advanced by TBARDA relies almost entirely on using the right-of-way in the existing interstate corridor. I'm not pushing that as a for or against, I'm just reminding the committee of it. Terrence Straught, I believe you were next.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. With that last comment you actually made was, I want to piggyback off of that. I know we want to see what may be gained, but also we have to look at what may be lost, just to stay neutral. know, I don't know how we can know exactly what's going to happen without the actual study being completed. So just want to remain neutral as we pursue it.
Fair enough. Nikki, you have a further comment?
I do. One of the comments made earlier by Christine was that we talked about possible tax revenue increases for, I mean, part of the long range plan and the long-term vision plan is to densify. And if you're familiar at all with the corridor right now, you can see condominiums going up. You can see an immense amount of change. The average price point per square foot is almost as high over here as it is in portions of South Tampa, all along that spine. So looking at that data would be, I think, far more impactful than trying to show a long-term vision, and seeing that this could be a huge economic boom to development and affordable housing and so many of the issues that we've been discussing. And it doesn't require an immediate implementation of putting transit right down it, but if we are connected for it down the road, we have a place to actually have that connects to all the east-west problems that we currently have here in this region. So is it possible to make a motion to, trying to think of how to phrase this, what she said in regards to possible tax revenue, because we say there's not that study there. There is the study there. There are there is a lot of this information there, and I don't feel like a whole new study has to be done. Or is there a way that we could get information in regards to the impact economically this would have to the 2040 plan? Is that something Rich could speak to? It just seems to me that we're focused on more of what FDOT wants to do here, or the regional connection, versus what's going to make this county far more like help us move forward here. And
Nikki, let me
even prioritize it.
Let me try to qualify your request. I think it's fair if you would accept my request that the staff try to bring to this committee whatever land use or economic development information might be available along that corridor, so we'll know what the starting point is. Would that be helpful?
Yes, because I mean, even if you look at the different, I apologize, I'm so tired today. The home, like not homeowners, but the neighborhood associations, or you get different planning that's going on with the city within that corridor. There's already projections in regards to increased revenue with densification and urban renewal here. So I'm just curious if there's a way to see some of this information, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to get people to listen to the long-term plan for the boulevard, is it has to make good economic sense and also help us stop spending money on projects that wouldn't be necessary if we could correct some of these issues here, which with traffic flow.
Okay. I think you've made a request. I think it is directed appropriately at the staff to see what information is available. And I'd like to ask that this item be put on the agenda for our next meeting. Is that satisfactory?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Other comments? Let me just add, and I mentioned the T-bar to RRT. Let me just add that this item keeps coming before our committee. I think that there are members of this committee who feel varying degrees strongly about the boulevard concept or something. I think it would be appropriate if members of this committee have specific ideas as to how to move that traffic and improve the overall condition of our community north of downtown. Come to a meeting prepared with some specific ideas that you'd like to throw out and ask that they be part of a study. And maybe that will spur an opportunity, as was just suggested, that we do that study in bite-sized pieces. So I would offer that opportunity to the committee at any time. Any other questions or comments about this? Before we come to our closing items, I want to recognize Ed Majerski. This is probably Ed's last meeting I want to thank him for his 4 years plus of service to the committee. We've enjoyed having you. We welcome your wisdom and your insight, and we're sorry to see you go.
Well, it's been a great experience, and I will try to still stay informed. I promise I won't be one of those citizens that's calling in every month with some comment, but on occasion I may do so.
Well, we would certainly welcome you to come and participate in every meeting that we have. Thank you again for your service to the county. Our next meeting is on May the 5th. It will begin the start of the TIP approval process. Amy, the pressure is on for your subcommittee. If there is no further business, is there any further business to come before the committee before we adjourn?
I see several hands.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, this is Christine. I just want to put it in the record that I have put a question in the question field. So if my question could be incorporated into our minutes and answered later, I would appreciate that.
Okay. Do you care to repeat the question for the committee?
Oh, my question reads, it's relative to the I-4 frame question. I'm asking, please provide more information on the vehicle to pedestrian and bicycle detection systems shown on the cartoon slide. Some reports indicate that this technology is not fully developed, and I'm concerned that the slide implies that it is fully developed.
Okay, good. Thank you for entering that on the record. We'll follow up on it. Karen Strott, do you have a comment?
Follow up. I previously wanted someone to talk to us, I think, about apps or at least social media when it comes to communicating MPO business, different things going on. I just wanted to follow up and make sure to have somebody come because I keep seeing the term website used a lot. Website means somebody has to go there. We need, information fit to people also. So
okay.
Social media and apps are a great way of doing it.
Good comment.
And one-stop shopping goes along with that. Where to find your reports and different meetings, agendas, and things like that.
Okay. Any other new business to come before the committee? Thank you to everyone who attended, especially for those who joined us in person to allow us to have a quorum under these current conditions. We look forward to seeing everyone on May the 5th, and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hey, Rich, while we're off the record, I wanted to ask you can you hear me?
Yes.
We have talked about this before with a public page on the Facebook or a public page for discussion over the tip for people able to check the legality of that.
Yeah, right.
Can you hear me now?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We've discussed before the capacity to share information between people in the group so long as it's public because of Sunshine Law. And since we have to have discussion regarding the tip, have you been able to find out whether it would be legal for us to have a public Facebook page or something where we could actually have discussion outside of the group so that when we come forward with it, we're a lot more productive?
Well, the general answer regarding Facebook or other platforms that require you to register in advance or become a member, so to speak, is that that's frowned on because of that, it's not open to anybody, unless you sign up for it. However,
host. So if the host approves you as somebody who can comment.
No, not even being a host. I mean, just in terms of gaining access to it. So I don't know if it's possible. We do have a Facebook page as an MPO, but I think you're talking about something a little different. You're talking like a forum.
Not so much a forum, but a place where we could also with the TAC would we be able to use that if we all join that page, right? To have a conversation inside of it regarding the tip, because it would be in the sunshine. Would that, did we ever find out if that would be legal?
Well, generally, I think
We're talking to each other, but we're doing
haven't
it
asked
in.
that question specifically, but I think generally that would probably not comply with the sunshine requirements because it's not totally open to the public. I mean, I think the way the MPO Facebook page works, it's pretty much one direction. I shouldn't say one direction. It allows people to comment. I mean, we push information out and people comment back to us as staff, but two members cannot communicate directly through our Facebook page because that would be out of the sunshine.
Even if it was in a thread and people could read it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the
I know
best
it skirts the
solution
line, but
is,
like it might be possible.
well, I think by having meetings that are in the sunshine means they have to be noticed in advance so the public can tune in, and they have to be recorded or summarized at the end so the public can know what's going on, and they have to be open to the public. And so that's why I think, you know, these meetings, for example, the one that just concluded, you know, gets put on our calendar well in advance so people know that it's happening. We allow people to, anybody can attend either virtually or in person. They can make comments, you know, early on in the agenda. And the meetings have minutes or summaries after it's over with. And I think all of those requirements would apply to any kind of direct dialogue between CAC members. And I think that's the problem with, you know, creating like a Facebook page for the TIP. I think the committee that Amy, the subcommittee that Amy is heading up, those meetings are open to the public. They're going to be advertised, you know, or I should say publicly noticed. And that would be the time for people to, you know, if you had a question or one of our new members had a question, wanted to ask, they certainly can do that. And, you know, they can talk, you all can talk amongst yourselves because that's like an open meeting.
Okay, you know I'm never gonna leave this alone, right?
Well, it's not the first time you brought it up. I know that. So, I mean, I think I can put you in touch with our attorney if you'd like.
Came in one time and couldn't cite any example of why it was an issue even to Wade. So it's pretty much was the attorney was like, no situation ever with non-voting, real, you know what I mean, non-elected. I just think I just have real issues with it in regards to when you're representing citizens, unpaid. So I know you agree with me, but when our legislators are allowed to do whatever they want out of the sunshine, the fact that we're even concerned about it is still hilarious to me. And I know the laws.
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, I think the attorney would tell you that anything that's skirts or seems like it might be perceived as
effective,
enabling members to communicate between themselves in advance of a meeting, even as an advisory committee. I mean, we are advising elected officials, right? That would run into trouble potentially with the sunshine. I mean, put yourself in the position of a citizen, for example, who wants to know what's going on, but doesn't want to join Facebook.
Okay, but also the fact that people can't communicate. I honest to God believe 60% of our board has no idea what the tip is. And it's been contingent on Rick Fernandez every year and certain people to go through that and find stuff. So I'm really excited about the committee, and I'm just going to remain open-minded till I hear from them. But I'm not quite sure what nefarious business we could get into, because the electeds are going to do what the electeds are going to do, and quite frankly, they don't read the tip either, most of them. So it is what it is. I'm just never going to let it go. I have real issues with sunshine law and the way it pertains to our board.
I hear you.
So I know you know this because I said it over and over. So I was just going to try again. Why not?
Sure. No, I hear you.
I'll find a new angle for you, Rich. I'll at least always come back with a different idea for it.
You could bring this up at the next CAC meeting and ask the CAC to take a position on it.
Okay.
And that would be one way of elevating it to the MPO board level. Again, I think you're fighting state law, or at least the interpretation of state law. So I don't want to make it sound like it's going to be a slam dunk. It probably won't be.
Rich, I never get slam dunks. I just work on stuff that never comes to fruition. It's awesome. I'm sure you understand.
I'm with you.
All right. Take care of yourself. I'll see you soon.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.